Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video, where today we're going to be looking at the Indian FTR1200S Race Replica model in some detail and with some footage that I captured from the London Motorcycle Show this year. In the last video we had the Kawasaki Z900RS Yoshimura edition, which you gave an average score of 8.45 out of 10. Most people were really into this bike, especially how it looked and the paint job, but the most common objection that came up was the seat and tailpiece, although I rather liked how it echoes the seat of the original Z1. Its score of 8.45 makes it the second highest rated bike so far, but that said, we've only looked at 3. I've got many more bikes to cover, so if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, then please do hit subscribe. And of course, please don't forget to leave your score out of 10 for this bike in the comments below and let me know why you gave it that score. I really enjoy reading all of your comments on each video, and it always gives me a few fresh perspectives. But without further ado, let's look at the details of this awesome looking new Indian. As always, let's start with the overall aesthetic of the bike, which in this case is based on Indian's iconic FTR750 flat track race bike. In 2017, they produced a prototype of a 1200cc road-going version, which was met with such enthusiasm that they eventually launched this full production model at Intermot last year. And although the overall look of the bike is more like a street bike than the aggressive and raw-looking prototype, it still has strong tracker influences. The trellis, swing arm and teardrop fuel tank are unmistakably from the original race bike. We've also got large wheels with an 18-inch at the rear and a 19 at the front, and they've got tracker-style Dunlop tyres mounted. Wide swept-back tracker bars and a chain drive as opposed to Indian's usual belt are subtler points than the not insignificant number board featured on this race replica. But tracker-specific features aside, there are loads of things I like about the stylings of this bike. The red colour scheme is iconic, although sadly not available on the cheapest base bike. But for me, the red frame of this race replica almost makes it worth the extra cash alone. There's some nice details like the logos on the engine covers and in the lighting, and I also really like the upswept pipes. But it's the overall stocky stance of the bike that really does it for me. It's nice and big and chunky at the front, but it has a neat, upswept tail at the rear. There's really nothing else like it on the market at the moment. The FTR1200 is built around a steel trellis frame, and although this differs from the more traditional frame of the original FTR750 race bike, both have a fuel tank that's mounted under the seat. Not only does this lower the centre of gravity, but it also leaves more space for a large airbox. Around this fuel tank is a lightweight aluminium subframe, and also at the back of the bike is the steel trellis swing arm we've already mentioned. Here we can see that the monoshock is mounted off to one side, and also that the swing arm pivot mounts straight onto the motor, which acts as a stress member, saving weight and also increasing rigidity. I say saving weight, but the FTR1200S still comes in at a pretty chunky 222 kilos dry. Fortunately though, the motor packs a decent punch. I was actually pretty surprised by how much power this bike puts out. When you look at it, you might think maybe 80 or 90 horsepower and probably tuned down for torque like most American V-twins. But it's actually capable of 120 horsepower up at 8,250 revs. It also delivers a peak torque of 85 foot-pounds at 6,000 revs, and it's tuned to be quite linear and predictable in terms of delivery. These figures are generated by a liquid-cooled 1203cc double overhead cam 60-degree V-twin with 4 valves per cylinder. The engine is somewhat related to the Indian Scout motor, but there are many changes to get more power out of it while also slimming it down both visually and in weight. The increased power comes from being bored out by 6mm and having an increased compression ratio of 12.5 to 1, whilst also having larger 60mm throttle bores. The footprint of the engine has decreased through a rethought crankcase, which has helped to change the gearbox layout. And there's magnesium covers and a lighter crankshaft, which mean that the motor is almost 18 kilos lighter than that of the Scout. Power is delivered through a multi-plate power assist slipper clutch into a 6-speed gearbox, and then finally a chain drive to the rear wheel. Lastly, this titanium Akrapovic slip-on exhaust is an official option that at the time of writing this video comes in at just under 1,200 quid when you factor in the change in passenger foot pegs needed to accommodate it. It certainly looks the business, especially with those carbon fibre heat shields, and I'm sure it sounds better than stock. But the Indian website doesn't make any claims about increased performance. Both the S and standard models of the FTR1200 feature the same front and rear braking systems from Brembo. At the front there are twin 320mm discs with Brembo 4-pot calipers, and at the rear there's a single 260mm rotor with a Brembo 2-pot caliper. There are 43mm upside down forks at the front and a monoshock at the rear, and both have the same decent 150mm of travel. On the S model that we're looking at here, these are both fully adjustable. The Dunlop DT3R tyres were developed specifically for the FTR1200, and they're based on Dunlop's DT3 Tracker race tyres. Now, in their original form, they would disintegrate too quickly with regular road riding, so although they look similar, they've got smaller and shallower treads in order to prevent the individual knobbly bits from flexing, and that should hopefully increase their mileage. And I've got to say, I run TKC 80s from Continental on my Triumph Street Twin at the moment, and the feeling of them flexing under braking and cornering is really quite horrible, so I don't think I'll be fitting those again. In terms of electronics, the S model has way more features than the base bike, and I think this makes it worth the extra money alone. First up, there's the 4.3-inch full TFT touchscreen dash that Indian developed in-house, whereas the standard model has a more regular analog clock. The screen allows the rider to toggle between 3 rider modes, so Sport, Standard and Rain. It also allows you to mess with the traction control and the anti-wheelie settings and disable the ABS. None of these features are available on the standard model. The TFT also has Bluetooth, so you can connect to your phone, music and other devices and control them through the dash. And there's also a USB port for charging. There's LED lighting all round. I really like the small front headlight and housing. And the rear light is neat and includes an illuminated Indian logo, which is a nice little touch. There's clear indicators on this particular model at the show, but I believe even when you pay 14 grand for the race replica, these are still a 50 quid option. But what can I say, this looks like an incredible bike. I'd absolutely love to get a spin on one and see how that 120 horsepower V-twin feels on the road. In terms of pricing, the base model comes in at just under 12 grand. The S model is 13 grand, and then this race replica, as I've already mentioned, is about 14 grand. So not cheap, but then again, I don't really see any other production trackers out there on the market, so perhaps there'll be plenty of people willing to pay for one. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. As always, really love to hear your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next video.